In this video, we're going to learn about the text to columns feature in Excel. We're using the same base spreadsheet that we used on the previous text functions assignment. And here we have a list of our city, state, and zip code, the population, and then the rank. Excel actually has a built-in ability to parse out or separate information in a given column or cell. In this case, we have the city, a comma and a space, and then the state, a comma and a space, and then the zip code. We can actually parse out this data without using functions. But the risk of that is that once it's parsed, or if new data is added, it will not automatically be separated. And so it's best to use functions or formulas if you can. But in the case that you can't, or that you need to just do something a single time, I want to teach you how to use the text to columns function in Excel. So I'm going to start here by inserting a few new columns. And we'll change those column widths to just be a little bit more conservative. I'm also going to change the font that I use here. And I'm going to choose Courier New. And the reason I'm choosing that one is because Courier New is what's known as a mono width or fixed width font. Every character takes up the exact same amount of space. And we'll explain why that's important here shortly. So if I start by selecting the data, Control-Shift down to select everything in this particular data set, then I go to the Data tab. I'll choose Text to Columns. It has two options. One is delimited and the other is fixed width. Delimited means that there's a certain character and indicator between each set of data. So I'll choose that one first. That could be a tab, it could be a semicolon, a comma, space, other. For example, sometimes a dash or a pipe is used to separate data. In this case here we see that there's a comma that separates the city and the state. And so in that case we'll uncheck everything except for comma and we'll just click Next. And here it will show you a preview of what that is. This allows you to choose if you want to not import a particular column. It allows you to pick the destination and it allows you to set the data format. So for example, if we choose this second column and we choose Do Not Import Column, when I click Finish, the only data left will be the general data here. We don't want to do that though. We want both of them. And so we'll just click Finish. And you'll see it's parsed it out into just the city, and then the state and the zip code are here. And you'll notice in this case we have a space, a leading space in front of our data. Something to always watch out for. Now in this case we have more data that needs to be parsed. And as we look at the states that are listed here, we can see that some of those states have two spaces in them, a space between the two words of the state's name. So we have to be a little bit more careful in how we parse that data out. I'm going to copy the formatting here that was in this previous column. And here again, we'll select the data. We'll choose Data, Text to Columns. And this time we'll choose Fixed Width. And Next. In a fixed width pull, this allows you to pull characters based on how much room there is between them. So it looks at Alabama here, and it counts how many characters there are, and then it will finish at the end of that line. As we go down here, it actually does not work because we have some states that are longer than others. So in this case, being able to use fixed width does not work. But if I choose that it's delimited, and now I choose instead of a comma that it's actually going to be a space, you can see that again we're going to run into an issue here because of states that have two names or two words in their name. So here it says to treat consecutive delimiters as one. That means if there's two spaces right next to each other, it will be treated as a single space. So if we choose to click Finish here, you'll notice I now have 3 columns of data. That's because there was a leading space in my data. And as I come down the list here, you'll see that those that were 2 separate words are in 2 separate cells. So when we use this text to columns function, we have to be careful about how we're parsing out the data. So if I press Ctrl Z and take it back to this spot that we're at, where the data is combined, I can actually do something to help me avoid that odd spacing problem that we're facing. And that is, you'll notice in here, it has between the words, there are 2 spaces between the state name and the zip code. And so what we can do is to select all of that data. We can press Control H, which is the shortcut to get to find and replace. It's also available on the Home tab over here. What we want to find is 2 consecutive spaces, and we want to replace those spaces with, I'm going to use the pipe character, which is right above the Enter key. And if I choose Replace All, you can see that we now have a delimiter that we can use to appropriately parse out this data. So again, we'll go to the Data tab, we'll choose Text to Columns, we'll choose that it is delimited, we'll choose Next. It's not a space, this time we're going to use the pipe character. And you'll see all the way down the list, even with larger size named states, it works to separate the state and the zip code. So we'll click Finish, and you'll see now we have the city in this column, the state in this column, and the zip code in this final column. Now, one last thing I do want to demonstrate on how to use the fixed width option. If with this zip code, we go to Text to Columns and we choose Fixed Width, let's say we wanted to split off just the first 2 numbers of the zip code. In this case, since everything is the exact same length, 5 digits, we can do that with this Text to Columns wizard. We'll click Next, and let's say I only want to import those first 2 numbers. Here I can choose to not import that column, and when I click Finish, it cuts it down just to those first 2 numbers of the zip code. Again, whenever we use this Text to Columns function, it does not allow you to repeatedly do the same thing with new data that's added. And it's a permanent move once it's done, whereas a function will update if I change the original base data, it will update whatever is coming down the line. Hopefully this helps as you learn to manipulate text within Excel.